Thank you. I've got three things that I want to say. One is about managers, one about managerialism, and one about language. So in terms of how Vice-Chancellors became managers, I interviewed a Vice-Chancellor from the 1980s as part of my PhD, and he said that when he first joined the Australian Vice-Chancellors Committee, the chair of the committee asked all the Vice-Chancellors to put their hand up for who was a member of the union, of FAUSA it was at that time. They all put their hands up. And he was shocked. He'd come from Canada and went, you can't be both management and union. What's going on? This is crazy. But because they didn't think of themselves as managers, they could do that, right? By the end of the 1980s, none of them were able to do that. So that's how we know that that change was going on. Dawkins had no control over this. He could do it through a bit of discourse and that sort of thing. This is something universities did themselves, and it's a whole lot of complicated reasons why. But the problem for Vice-Chancellors now is that they're stuck in that. Once they get to it, they're stuck. And it's a horrible, horrible job. I don't know why they do it. And I'm starting to think now we don't need they've got themselves stuck in this position. We do wonderful work in universities, doing great teaching, wonderful research that addresses all sorts of social problems, and the only people standing in our way are these poor people trying to do this terrible job. That's about the managers. About managerialism is about a lack of trust in academics. I once sat in a room with Guy Redden, who has also, some of you might know, has done some research on, as I have, on neoliberalism and that whole period. And I said, Guy, the thing that bothers me, that keeps me awake at night, and I don't know about you, is that it worked. It worked. Is that the thing we don't want to say, right? Is that before we had this managerialism that we hate, we've got so many stories of horrible waste. While we wish that all our colleagues behaved with integrity at every moment, they don't always. And sometimes this has worked, and damn it, I wish it didn't, because this is not what we want. Because I agree, I don't think that this is the way forward. I don't think scholarship can be managed. I wish to heavens we could have politicians and a public that trusted us, but we've got to be worth trusting. And this is the thing that I would like to see, is instead of a managerial approach, a rethink of all of our structures of funding, of governance, and of self-regulation that protect the integrity of what we do in a way that means that we don't have to have it. So I think that's our big task. That's a really big task for the university. And working on our integrity is a big part. The third one is the language of management. I want to just refuse it and say, let's not use it. And I'm sorry to say, the people who use this language the most is the NTU. Because you hear, when do you hear management? It's from us. Senior leaders in the university don't call themselves managers. They think of it as a pejorative term that's being thrown at them all the time. They don't care anymore. I think let's just stop it. They're not managers, they're senior colleagues. This is part of the community of scholars. We've all got the same task. And I get in industrial relations, there's a necessary difference here, but the more we call them managers, the more that they are. So let's just not do it.
I agree with your last point there, and that's where I was trying to make some point was, one thing I don't understand is most of these senior colleagues were former academics, so how did they just jump off to the other fence? I mean that's a point. Like if you say that they are recognizing themselves as senior leaders, don't they feel more caring towards the way the system operates, the way that they have been having some experiences? I've literally seen these deputy vice chancellors and vice chancellors being involved in these policy forums and roundtables, and literally when they speak about internationalization in terms of competition, moving overseas, increasing markets. But what about the quality? What about supporting your, all of this is now reflecting, because I didn't know about these situations that have been discussed today. But to be honest, when I'm reflecting now with my engagements before with them, all of that was just skipped. Like this was not discussed at all at that senior level. So it's just surprising to me that this is not on their top agenda.
That's a very opportune comment, because the last thing that I think we have time for briefly before I throw it open to general discussion among all of us is the question of the agency of individual academics, because of course a way in which the predicament that we're currently in is typically construed is that neoliberalism and all its attendant depredations were something that were imposed on universities. But of course the truth is we had a hand in that. We partly did it to ourselves. We were complicit in it. And that mere fact alone, I think, does suggest that we have some degree of agency. We have an agency to change it as well, I would like to think, to resist it and to change it. So I wonder whether there are people on the panel who would like to address that question of the way that the agency of the individual student, the individual researcher, the individual lecturer could be deployed in order to actually get traction in this situation, to try and steer it in a direction which would be more conducive to us.
Well, I have doubts actually that it is really possible. I mean, my personal view is the rise of kind of the managerial class. I mean, I used to think that people became vice chancellors because they basically, all their ideas had dried up and there was nowhere left for them to go. But now I see some vice chancellors, the way they behave is like they want to run a Fortune 500 company, right? They want to be running a Fortune 500 company. And I think you can play at that globe-trotting game because universities have got so large. I mean, I sit in a department as part of a school that resolves into a faculty, as part of a division that, blah, 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 blah. I'm so far removed from decision-making in my job. And I think it is really, I mean, if we think about it, we didn't actually grow since Dawkins that many more universities, but we started to take in so many more students and have so many more academics. And I think it is partly the fact that because we became such big institutions, we created the need for some sort of management of these institutions. So I have doubts, and I think one of the things that we have to deal with as we move to 2025 and the desire to have 40% of school leaders go to universities is think about whether we want more universities, smaller universities, more niche universities, more collegial universities, and admit that, that as we become massive, multi-campus, huge undertakings, that almost automatically necessitates a big managerial class. And the problem is not creating a sort of a framework that is beyond that, but saying that we've actually grown too big. And it does remind me of Anthony Beevor, the historian, talked about Hemingway. And he said that Hemingway really admired personal discipline and fortitude in other people. And I think we can see that as part of the problem. Like, we all want, as academics, to be totally autonomous, but we want all our other colleagues to be really disciplined in the work that they do. And I think that necessitates a lot of management as the span of control got too big. So I think it's a fundamental organisational problem, but I bet Robert's probably got different things to say.
Oh, look, I'm going to do something awful. I'm just going to say I'm old enough to remember universities before neoliberalism. And I can't say, I'm probably the third or fourth oldest person in the room. And I can't say it was perfect, but I remember vice-chancellors as just senior academics. I remember deans as people who would take you aside and have a chat with you and genuinely interested in your research and with a sense, almost like an uncle. The dean was kind of like an uncle. The head of school was like an older brother. It really was a sort of family relationship. I was at a large red brick university. Looked like yellow brick. It was actually Red Brick University, University of New South Wales. So it was large, but it didn't necessitate the sort of managerialism we're seeing now. I think the rot really set in, and this really displays my industrial politics. The rot set in with enterprise bargaining. When we were on a combined one award across all universities, our enemy was the Minister for Education and the department, and on the same side as us was the Vice Chancellor. So there wasn't an us versus them. They weren't management. They were there with us. They were fighting with us to get a better deal. there was no such thing as Universities Australia or the AHEIA.
They were probably paid the same as you too, actually.
Yeah, they probably weren't paid that much more, and they did it for the honour and the glory. What kept us? I noticed, Hannah, I want to dissent from you a bit. You said that there were things that went wrong. Hey mate, there are things that go wrong at the neoliberal university, and I'm not convinced, having served in both, I'm not convinced that neoliberalism actually produced a better product. Yeah, we had time servers, and yeah, we had people who really probably weren't working as hard as they should, but we had a sense of collective commitment, and I think there is a value in collective commitment. There's a self-regulation that comes out of collective commitment that I genuinely think works. I think that I'm convinced that the neoliberal project has caused us all to a kind of collective amnesia on what collectivism does. And we've been brought up on the idea that collectivism means the Soviet Union failed, therefore all collectivism fails. It just ain't true. I mean, if you look at the track record in teaching, Australia had an exceptionally high standard of living based on our public schools, our TAFE colleges or technical schools, and our universities, and we maintained that throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s without managers, without the sort of the reigning philosophies of neoliberalism. I think we have to somehow or other, and I don't think we should go backwards, we should go forwards to something new, but we should look at the values that informed universities, informed other institutions in Australian society, and look at the things there that worked, and the ideas of collegiality, the ideas of cooperation, the ideas of collective spirit that really did work without the need for a hierarchy.
Look, I have to respond to your question about agency by also taking a different position on management. Look, to me, management is partly just about coordination. I mean, we're in a complex organisation, lots of different people at different levels having to do quite different things, and it all has to kind of fit together somehow. And I just think you can't do that without some people spending a bit of time on organising that, right? So to me, management is just organisation. It's a bit like thinking that all lawyers are dreadful and the law is a dreadful system without really understanding exactly how important law is in underpinning the structure of our relationships with each other and giving it some kind of shape. So what management for me does is give shape to what we do, and that in terms of exercising some kind of agency, I think the best way to do that is to have a nuanced, sophisticated, kind of well thought through, intelligent understanding of how management works. I think we have to understand management better and engage with it in a more active kind of way, and not allow the emails to just come down to us, to actually speak back to management. And I think that's one of the great things about this event, right? I mean, one of the things that struck me about the whole enterprise bargaining process was that all the communication was one way. There was no public sphere, right? There was no realm where we could all kind of exchange ideas. If there was any kind of communication back upwards, it was just at an individual basis. We couldn't hear what each other was saying, right? That's the really important thing. So we just need to do more of that, more of this, and actually think about, I think there is such a thing as good management, actually. There's no such thing as a good manager, right? That's my point about management ethics. But I think there is good and bad management, and we can think about how we can make the management structures work better, what kind of processes we can put in place that work, to make the university the kind of place we would like it to be, to address a lot of the problems that we've talked about today.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Look, that's leads us into the discussion period. Now, I think the way this is going to work is that there is a roving mic. Okay, it's that one. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is just ask people to, raise their hands if you want to make a comment or ask a question of the speaker. Perhaps it might be good if you can identify somebody whose comments you want to specifically pick up on, do so. Otherwise, just make a general comment and we'll throw it open to the panel. So is there anybody who wants to get us going here? Sorry, Kaye. Don't be shy. Yeah. So can